Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ancient Warfare Answers with me, Murray, your host. I'm here to answer a question on the Skiritai in a second, which I'll get to in just a moment from Samuel. But before that, of course, you can ask us a question, and then I can attempt to answer it. If I don't get to your questions, it's basically because I have no idea. And so I apologize for anyone who asks me a question that I can't find out the answer. Or the answer is either so short, no, yes, that it's not going to make 10 minutes, or it's so enormous and, a lifetime's work or a PhD's worth of work that there's no way I can say in 10 minutes. So those are some of the reasons why, if you've asked us a question and it hasn't been answered, that's possibly why. Now, you can, of course, ask us a question too. Send us an email, comment on a previous video or a previous podcast, comment, send us a message, all those things. You can back us on Patreon at one of 3 different levels and ask us a question. Now, Samuel asks, Xenophon makes reference to the Skiritai as part of the Spartan army. I think one of these is during Agesilaus's foray into Boeotia in the 370s AD. BC, Murray, wrong period. A quick Google search reveals that the ancient sources are a bit patchy. That's a very good summary. Do we know or can we infer anything about the Skiritai? How do they fit into Spartan society as a whole? What roles did they perform within the Spartan army on and off the battlefield? How were they armed? Any answers, educated guesses welcome. Well, many of those we don't know. So that's going to get me back down to almost 10 minutes anyway. However, when we start to go through the evidence for the Skiritai, we get the idea that we're told in Thucydides that the Skiritai are from Skiris, a rural community akin to the Perioikoi in northern Laconia who guarded the road to Tegea. So the Skiritai seem to be a sort of a mountain people who guard the road into Laconia and therefore sort of maintain the isolation aspect of Sparta and Laconia. Now, at the Battle of Mantinea, there's 600 men from Skiris, possibly light infantry. We're not exactly sure whether they're light infantry or not, because they guard the left flank of the Spartan phalanx. Now, in hoplite warfare, the left flank, as in the shield side, isn't the vulnerable flank. The right side, the unshielded side, is the vulnerable flank. So it's not quite, the edges of the phalanx are indeed vulnerable, but the left side is much less vulnerable than the right side. And we get reports in Thucydides and elsewhere of the phalanx always inching to the right because you're always trying to go into the shield of your neighbor who's protecting your unprotected right side, not your left, which is protected by your own shield. So that's that. So were they light infantry or were they not? Now, we find in various other places that the Skiritai are on that left side of Spartan armies. Now, at the Battle of Mantinea, the interesting thing is that each lokos of the Spartans had 512 men in it. And so the 600 Skiritai are very close in number to that number. They outnumber the men of the Spartan lokos, the lokoi. And so it could be that they're their own kind of heavy infantry. At the Battle of Mantinea, you've got the 5 traditional lokoi and the brassidoi, who seem to be the men who went with Brassidus up to Amphipolis in 424 BC, and then defeated Cleon at the Battle of Amphipolis in 422. And so they then come back to Sparta. They may have been Neodamodes, so they're newly freed helots and other men turned into hoplites, but they're a different question. Now, the Skiritai, they seem to fight as hoplites, and they're traditionally placed on the left wing. We're told that by Diodorus as well. Were they light armed? Possibly. Were they part of the traditional Spartan military lineup? Absolutely. So we find several references to them in Thucydides, Xenophon, both in the Hellenica and the Constitution of the Lacedaemonians, and in Diodorus. So they certainly are mentioned. Now, the problem in the Diodorus, one of the Diodorus mentions, is he calls the 300 Hippace, the bodyguard of the king, he calls them the Sciritai, which they're not. They weren't the Hippace, and the Hippace weren't the Sciritai. So that's kind of like, what do we deal with that? Now, what you've got in the Hellenica, for instance, talking about 383 BC, was that with Eudamidas is sent out emancipated Helots, men of the Perioikoi, and the Skiritai to the number of about 2,000. So what it seems there is, that Helots, Perioikoi, and Skiritai, they're going out when actual Spartan hoplites are not. And so you've got this idea that they're a reliable infantry force who fought on the left flank of the Spartan phalanx. I'm tempted to call them light infantry, but I'm also open for them to not be light infantry in the sense of that they could have been heavier, for lack of a better term. Now, the other thing, of course, is that they tend to get called elite light infantry, which is a very modern idea, that elite infantry tend to be heavy in ancient warfare. And even talking of elite is an interesting term. When we talk about the Hippace, we talk about the Theban Sacred Band and other elite units. They are, generally speaking, more highly trained or state-supported infantry who are the same as standard heavy infantry of that state. The Sacred Band hoplite, as far as we know, is no better armed or armored than your traditional Theban hoplite, but they are paid for by the state. The 300 is maintained. They are in the front rank, according to Diodorus. So in that regard, they're elite, but they're not elite in the sense that they're heavy, different in terms of armament. So elite corps is a very misleading modern term. So again, what we get, the constitution of the Spartans, constitution of the Lacedaemonians, in battle, the left wing is composed of the Sciritai, the Lacedaemonians have always let them hold that post alone, which seems to be a traditional honor thing. Again, one of the things about that, and again, we get it mentioned at the Battle of Plataea, that the Tegeans, who are traditional hoplites, are always allowed to stand to the right of the Spartan phalanx. They do that at the Battle of Mantinea and other battles. So they're on the right. So that seems to be an honor thing rather than necessarily a strategic tactical thing, which doesn't help in the argument, are they light infantry or are they hoplites? We get in the Sciritai a description of the Sciritai, which is a bit confusing because it's the Sciritai, so it's dealing with Cyrus the Great in the 6th century BC, but it's written by Xenophon in the 4th century BC. And he talks about how the Hyrcanians are the neighbors of the Assyrians, not a large nation, but they are a reputation for being good cavalry, and they have that reputation still. And for that reason, the Assyrians, and this is the quote, the Assyrians used to employ them as the Spartans do the Sciritai, sparing them neither hardship nor danger. Were they therefore cavalry? No, they were not. It's not a comparison of troop type, the Hyrcanians and the Sciritai, but the manner in which they were used by the Assyrians. The Hyrcanians were used by the Assyrians mirrors the way the Spartans used the Sciritai. So they used them because they had a good reputation. They didn't spare them in hardship or danger. And so, they ascribed them various tasks. And so what you have then is this unit of Skiritai, which is a rural northern Laconian town that provides and constantly provides this unit of 600 men that will traditionally stand on the Spartan left flank. Could be hoplites, could be light infantry, could be slightly heavier light infantry, but they're certainly a consistent part of Spartan armies, but one that doesn't really get a lot of emphasis in modern scholarship. I hope that answers your question. We will see you again soon for another Ancient Warfare Answers. Thanks very much.